Jess's fans believed that Lil Scrappy was on the mend. Then the unthinkable happened. He was taken to the intensive care unit, and his condition took a terrible turn for the worse. At the hospital, loved ones are frantically praying for a miracle, and there is an overwhelming sense of despair and heartbreak. Scrappy is reportedly in agony, and Bambi, his estranged wife, has been spotted with her face buried in her hands, unable to control her emotions. According to family sources, Scrappy's condition is critical. As we analyze every tragic detail of this heartbreaking crisis, the last vestige of hope for the beloved rapper is still hanging by a thread. Late last night, as sirens echoed through the air, his condition took a terrifying turn overnight, leaving everyone in complete panic. They are demanding answers from doctors who seem reluctant to acknowledge the severity of the situation. Medics are rushing to stabilize him with urgent tests, but the prognosis looks grim, and his team is pleading with people to send prayers. When Scrappy was declared stable a few days ago, fans rejoiced, thinking that the worst was finally over. However, fate had other plans, and something had gone horribly wrong. Insiders reveal that for the past few days, Scrappy had been feeling exhausted and dizzy. Within minutes, Atlanta Street emergency responders raced to a private residence, and Lil Scrappy was being wheeled out on a stretcher, his face pale, his body barely moving, and the tension in the air was thick. Disregarding it as the aftermath of his previous health scare, everything changed last night when he collapsed. Family members immediately called 911 in a panic, but by the time paramedics arrived, his condition had worsened. His breathing was labored, and his pulse was weak. When the news broke, social media went into a frenzy, with one fan tweeting in shock. But it was horrifyingly real, and what was happening behind those hospital doors was even more heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. Then came the first devastating phone call. Mama D was the first person to arrive at the hospital. As soon as she stepped in, she let out a gut-wrenching scream, pushing past nurses and security who tried to calm her down. If you know Mama D, you know that nothing stands between them. Nurses rushed to action, strapping oxygen masks, inserting machines, and beeping frantically. But what's even more terrifying is that the doctors were unable to determine what was wrong because his vitals were unstable, and his body wasn't responding to treatment as they had anticipated. After storming into the intensive care unit waiting area with her son, demanding answers and demanding to see Scrappy with her own eyes, no sugarcoating, no assurances, her heart broke. Through the glass window of the ICU, she saw Scrappy lying there motionless, wires hooked up to his body, machines monitoring his every breath, and doctors huddled around him, whispering grimly. That's when it hit her that this was much worse than she had imagined. She put her hands on the glass and whispered, "Baby, you got to fight, you hear me?" For those who don't know, Scrappy and Bambi's relationship has been nothing short of a roller coaster. There have been public arguments, divorce rumors, and an emotional whirlwind. Insiders reveal that when Bambi received the call, she questioned whether she would even be able to return this time. After everything that had happened, including when Scrappy was hospitalized before, she was there then. When the time came, Mama D answered the phone and said, "I don't care what's going on between you. If you ever loved my son, you need to get down here." The hospital was clearly shaken, but if Bambi had assumed that she would be greeted with open arms, she was totally wrong. When Mama D saw her, she snapped, her arms crossed, and she sneered, "Oh, you care?" The tension in the room was suffocating. Bambi took a deep breath, trying to keep her composure, but Mama D wasn't having it. "Don't you talk to me about what Scrappy needs. Scrappy needed us, and now that things get ugly, you want to come back? You have no idea what I've been going through." The tension in the waiting room was unbearable, and nurses were unsure whether to step in. However, before the argument could continue, a doctor walked in, his face weary and grim. "We need to talk about Scrappy's condition." All of a sudden, everything fell silent. Mama D turned to the doctor, her hands shaking, and her voice barely above a whisper cracked as she asked, "What's wrong with him?" "My baby." The doctor stepped forward, looking down at the file in his hands. "We've done numerous tests, and there are complications." Bambi's heart was racing. "But you said he would respond well to treatment." The room felt like it was closing in on Mama D. Her breath caught in her throat as she gripped the armrest of a nearby chair, her knees threatening to buckle. The doctor hesitated, and in that moment of silence, the weight of those unsaid words crushed everyone in the room. Bambi turned away, tears streaming down her cheeks, and Mama D's hands shook violently, her heart pounding. The doctor said, We need to be ready for anything. But Mama D refused to accept it.
No.
No, I will not prepare for that, she said, her voice breaking. There must be something else you can do. You fix my son. The doctor flipped through Scrappy's chart. We're running additional tests, but his oxygen levels are dropping. His heart rate is unstable. Right now, he needs a miracle. That statement sent a chill down Mama D's spine. Miracle? The doctor repeated, looking at her sympathetically. But she shook her head violently, stepping toward him. I don't accept this. Do you hear me? You cure him. You fix my baby. The doctor was unable to say anything more. Quietly, he excused himself. At that point, Mama D turned on Bambi. This is your fault, she spat, her voice filled with pain and rage. Bambi's eyes widened in shock. Are you serious right now? Mama D pointed a shaking finger at her. You walked out on him. You broke him. You put him through so much stress, and now look at him. He's in there fighting for his life. Melody stepped closer, her voice full of raw emotion. After you left, he pretended to be fine, but he was never the same. His world fell apart. He hardly slept, and now his body has just given up. Tears ran down Bambi's face as she took a shaky step back. It's not fair, Mama D scoffed, crossing her arms. You left when he needed you the most, and now that it's almost too late, you want to come back? Bambi's voice cracked. That's not what happened. When I left him, I was trying to protect myself because we were toxic and hurting each other. But that doesn't mean I don't care. The tension was unbearable. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get any worse, the ICU alarm went off. A nurse burst into the waiting room, her face pale with panic. We need help now. Scrappy's condition was rapidly deteriorating. No, Mama D gasped, her breath catching in her throat. Bambi trembled, her voice breaking. Inside, nurses and doctors worked frantically around Scrappy's bed. His chest rose and fell unevenly, his oxygen levels were crashing, and his body convulsed violently. The sound of the monitor flatlining sent shivers down a mother's spine. Without thinking, both women pushed past the nurse and hurried towards Scrappy's room, but two security guards blocked their path. You cannot be in here right now, one said firmly. Mama D lost it. Move out of my way, she shouted. The doctors battled for what seemed like an eternity to bring Scrappy back, using CPR, shock paddles, and everything else. But time dragged on mercilessly. Then, like a miracle, a doctor exclaimed, "We have a pulse." The waiting room erupted in relief. But the danger was far from over. Scrappy was still alive, barely. When the lead doctor finally emerged into the hallway, he looked exhausted. We've stabilized him for the time being, but his condition is still critical. Mama D sank into a chair and buried her face in her hands, whispering, "Thank you, Jesus." Bambi, still shaking, asked if they could see him. The doctor hesitated for a moment before nodding. Mama D immediately got up, wiped away her tears, took a deep breath, and entered Scrappy's room. The sight of him lying there, his face pale, lips dry, machines beeping steadily, and a breathing tube keeping him alive, broke her heart. Tears ran down her cheeks as she sat next to him, holding his hand. "Baby, it's me. Mama's here," she whispered, her voice cracking as she gripped his hand even tighter. "Please, baby.
Please come back to me.
I can't do this without you." Mama D rose from her chair, turned to the door, and gestured for Bambi to follow. Bambi took a deep breath, wiped away her tears, and rushed to his side. As soon as she saw him, she took his hand and pressed it against her cheek. "Scrappy," she whispered. "Do you hear me? You have to fight." But her voice wavered. She tightened her grip on his lifeless hand, her heart pounding in her chest. She whispered, "I know that things between us have been complicated," she choked out, "but I need you to know. The next 24 hours are critical. We must wait and see," the doctor had said earlier. Bambi nodded, her breath trembling as she sat beside him, holding on as if he might disappear. This wasn't just a health crisis anymore, it was a fight for his life, and no one knew how this story would end. The dim hospital lights cast an eerie glow over the room. The machine beeped steadily, and Scrappy's motionless body looked almost ghostly under the sterile light. "I never stopped loving you. I never stopped caring," Bambi whispered as she squeezed his hand. Then, his fingers twitched. She froze and squeezed his hand harder, saying, "Scrappy, please, you have to fight. Your family needs you. I need you." The door creaked open, and Mama D entered, her face still wet with tears. She whispered, "I think he tried to move." The air felt suffocating, and then there was another flicker. Mama D gasped and hurried to his bedside, pressing a trembling hand to his forehead. She whispered, "Oh Lord, please bring my baby back to me." His eyelids fluttered again. His fingers twitched, and a faint moan escaped his lips. "Can you hear me, Scrappy baby?" The machines beeped a little faster. His weak breathing grew a little stronger, and Mama D grabbed Bambi's arm as she braced herself. "Come on, Scrappy," she said. "Just open your eyes, baby. Just once." Slowly, painfully, his eyes cracked open, and his gaze wandered between Bambi and Mama D. His mouth barely moved as he exhaled a fragile whisper. "Mama." Mama D lost it. She grabbed his face, sobbing violently, tearing the wail from her chest. "Oh, my baby. Thank you, Jesus." Bambi clung to his hand, sobbing. "You scared us so much. We thought we lost you." His face was clouded with confusion, and his voice was barely above a breath when the doctor hurried in to check his vitals. His face lit up with amazement. "This is unbelievable. He shouldn't be conscious yet." Scrappy was fighting. Mama D gently smoothed his hair, still crying, and whispered, "We've been praying for you, baby." Scrappy swallowed, his throat dry, and his tired eyes drifted to Bambi. She choked on a sob but nodded firmly.
"Of course I did," she said.
"And I'm not leaving you." Hope filled the room for the next few days as it seemed Scrappy was finally recovering. However, just as relief began to set in, the doctor's expression changed to one of seriousness. He said quietly, "This is tremendous progress, but Scrappy's health is still precarious. We don't yet know the full extent of his injuries. His body has endured a lot." Mama D wiped her eyes, turning to him. "We need to run more tests. We still don't know what caused the sudden relapse. It's possible that his organs suffered trauma from the earlier incident." "What do you mean you don't know?" Bambi asked, her stomach twisting. The doctor sighed. He was under a lot of stress, possibly dehydrated, but something triggered this collapse. "Until we find out, he's still in danger." A heavy silence fell over the room, and the fear that had briefly subsided came rushing back. "I don't know. I was just tired," Scrappy said, furrowing his brows. Bambi looked worriedly at Mama D, who immediately grabbed Scrappy's hand and squeezed it tightly. "Have you been feeling sick before this happened?" she asked gently. "I don't know," he said weakly. "You overexerted yourself," Mama D said softly. Scrappy laughed weakly. "I just wanted to stay active. Keep my mind occupied." His eyes shifted toward Bambi, and something unintelligible passed between them. "Don't start, Bambi," he muttered. "You mean keep your mind off her?" Mama D said, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, now you care?" Bambi said bitterly. Where was that concern when he was drowning in his own pain? "I didn't come here to fight, Mama D," Bambi snapped. "I came because I care." The tension in the room vanished instantly as Scrappy exhaled deeply. "I don't have time for this," he said, swallowing hard. Then, nodding and wiping away her tears, Bambi whispered, "You're right." Reaching for his hand once more, she added, "The only thing that matters right now is getting you better." The doctor glanced at the monitors, his expression unreadable. "Scrappy, you're stable for now, but the next 48 hours are critical. We need to run additional tests. I need you to rest, stay monitored, and keep an eye on your oxygen and heart levels." With little choice, Scrappy forced a lazy grin. As his eyelids drooped and exhaustion pulled him under, a terrifying question lingered in the air. Would he survive the night? This wasn't the end. The battle had only just begun. A call to action was issued. The hospital room may have been quiet, but the storm surrounding Scrappy's health was far from over. What happens next could determine whether he makes a full recovery, or if this is just the calm before the real storm. Mama D whispered, "You rest, baby." Bambi delicately touched his hand and added, "You're not going anywhere." What do you think really caused Scrappy's sudden decline? Was it stress from overworking, or was there something more serious going on? And what about Bambi? Could this be the wake-up call they needed to find their way back to each other? Or is the damage too deep? Lastly, will Mama D forgive Bambi, or is this family feud just getting started? Scrappy's collapse revealed painful truths, unresolved issues, and lingering wounds between him and Bambi. With his life on the line, the streets are talking, and we need to hear your thoughts. If you're hoping for Scrappy's recovery, please share your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button and subscribe to receive all the most recent updates. Is this hospital scare just another chapter in their wild love story? Trust me, this tale is far from finished.